Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am once again Fraud No-Go, because I am not alone. I am bringing with me a new voice to the caster pile here. The Fraudmentator role has now been bestowed to none other than JujiK. What's up, my man? How you doing?
Hey, doing good. Excited to be here.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. We were just talking before we started this cast that you've recently acquired a Drakiden picture for your Discord account. I mean, a big fan, of course. You know, people are going to be like, what's that cool Protoss-looking unit in unrelated discussions and servers? And you can just be like, well, it's funny that you've asked about our Lord and Savior, Cosmonarchy Brood War, but you can find it at fraudsclub.com. Anyway, we are going to get into this set of 4 games between none other than Krankendau's Zerg and I believe Hamster's Terran, although maybe he was playing random. We'll have to find out. That being said, this is not going to be all in one video because there are 4 matches and they seem to be pretty sizable looking at the file size, although that's only an estimate for the replay length. So I figure we'll do this as a 2-parter, but let's get into things on Genesis Y. And tell me, JujiK, have you played much on this map by BDB? Do you know much about it? Do you have much of an opinion on it, so to speak?
Yeah, I've played it a few times. It's probably one of the 3rd most common maps I've played on. I really like the spawn positions. This is kind of unique among most maps.
Yeah, I can say that for sure. The fact that it is indeed everybody is sort of mirrored along the sort of north and south instead of the it being X and Y or like diagonal, right? So you look at that. I know you're obviously a map maker yourself, and you've made a couple matches and maps and such. So to me, I look at this and I always wonder what other map makers are thinking. But we do have Krankendau in the top right. I'm going to go ahead and guess he's still rocking the maroon color. Looks like he is, with Hamster in the bottom right. Is this Celadon still? I mean, these guys make it too easy because they prefer the same colors every game. But yeah, they are indeed those colors in those spawns. A fairly fast scout. You've been playing a bunch of the races across it. Obviously, your main being Protoss. But as we get into things, how are you feeling about scout timings? Because this is an interesting point in Cosmonarchy. I feel like nobody has a real math behind what they do. They're just like, oh, it feels good to scout this early, so I do it. I feel like that's what Crank's doing. What do you think?
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting because a lot of times I scout right at the beginning with my first worker that comes out. But whether or not you have anything to see when you get there is the big thing. It looks like this early scout, he might be just trying to see if he has to worry about making a lot of quads or something, or with the fulcrum opening here, I'm not sure he's going to have much pressure early on. So the scout might just let him try to eco up pretty heavy here.
Yeah, I feel like because Krankendau's put his scouts so far forward, he has gone pool before Larvosk, but you can kind of pivot directly into Larvosk and just not make the quaz units for the initial bit. So it's not the end of the world for his tempo. But he does leave before seeing if there's a quarry coming down. And I feel like that timing there, it does guarantee that you get your Droleth out. If you send it maybe one worker later, maybe the Vulture can catch up to it and kill it. And that's what he's thinking about. It's interesting because Crank usually has a rhyme or reason for why he does things. But it does mean that he doesn't have any knowledge of it. Is it a quarry follow-up? Or, as we see here, Hamster going for that fast second Fulcrum.
Yeah,
so,
I don't think he caught this Fulcrum, yeah. This is going to be rough to deal with.
He's got a couple quads to hold the ramp at the very least. They should be able to get on over there before anything happens too disastrously, so to speak. But Hamster's not one to just sort of lose units, so he's going to get up there, get tickled a little bit. He's going to fall on back and just sort of rally to contain. And that's probably the best option here for Hamster because, I mean, he is going to be behind the overall worker count that you'd normally see from the quarry. But if he can deny the second base from going down, then he can still get himself into a nice economic position relative to his opponent.
Yeah, I think it leans really well into his playstyle as well. He's a pretty aggressive player.
I would definitely have to agree with that. He's always come up with interesting strategies. When he was playing as Protoss, he was the guy and the only person I've seen in a recorded match or otherwise to do the trick where you bring your pylon with an envoy and a single legionnaire, you unload it, and you attack the pylon and elevator all your other legionnaires up a cliff.
Oh, yeah, I haven't actually seen that.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting when he did that. So the Ovoleth is out for Crank. He's going to see the lobotomy mines, not fear too much of them. He's going to signal Hamster to go on in. Nice easy snipe there, but doesn't want to unload the K-Grunt in his face for obvious reasons. There's a lot of mines over here.
There's actually a lot of vultures here as well. He's not really opting to do any kind of defense in the main. If he gets sniped out here on a couple of these quads, he might be in trouble.
Yeah, this could be a very fast opening game. Forget what I said. But I am looking at this and thinking, with the quazes coming out, it's forcing a lot away from a worker focus, but Crank does have a really nice worker count Again, that missing quarry definitely adding up here.
Now, I'm not sure if he's trying to hide these vultures or if he's just not using them here.
Yeah, the ones on the south, I feel like maybe he's forgotten about them. This is an opportunity to snipe down that K-Grunt. That is a pretty expensive loss, and it does kind of mean that Krankendau is out a little bit worse for wear on the defense. I mean, there's still significant numbers of vultures. That's about the same number as Quas are still left. He has to restart his K-Grunt elsewhere and transport it over. And a lot of that was probably down to the mines detonating and stunning the Ovaleth as well, so it's not like he could cancel it and pick it back up.
It does look like things might cool down here. We got the second coming out here from Hamster.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, his Ministry on location. It's going to be a lot of worker production queues out of Hamster if he goes Ministry into another quarry. I know Shopkeeper Dog, another recent Terran player, he's started to try to do the math behind when it's appropriate to take a quarry and when it isn't. Nice to see somebody doing that. But Hamster not buying it just yet. This game played before then. Nice attempted stun there, despite the Ovaleth. That's the attack priority, kind of getting screwy. Focusing down the vultures instead of the mines. Has to be a little bit more deliberate.
This Kraken here to come out. This is actually really good for him.
Yeah,
I think we can get this base down now. He's a little behind, but I think with Zerg it doesn't matter too much.
As long as you can buy the time, right? Because then you can just go straight into extra production, build up the workers, you know. And he's actually not behind in terms of worker count, and he is going to jump on putting that hatch down. But I think Hamster's also very happy with this situation. His Ministry's just about to finish, and he's adding a third Fulcrum, so he should be able to get behind that. Star Pad for probably Antseals, can't rule out drops yet. And the Shroud coming up for Krankendau, so not a lot of Vespene access just yet because his Natural's been so delayed.
Yeah, I really like this Cyclops transition as well that he's gone into here. I think it's a much more defensive setup.
Yeah, it can deal with this Ovaleth Scout as well if Krankendau's not careful, and I feel like he's not being careful. He's kind of suiciding it to see if he can scout that Star Pad coming out. And it looks like he will be able to get vision of it. Ah, attacking the Ministry. Why not?
Is it going to get out here? Oh, okay, no. They get
not quite. Not quite. I will say, though, that the Cyclops are... They're working their... They're definitely, like, worth their weight these days. I mean, they got a price reduction after Acropolis, which I felt like was going to usher in an era of them just being utter, like, spam machines. You just build almost nothing but them. I have seen that reports of stuff like that happening, but I haven't actually casted any games where it has happened yet. So we'll have to wait and see. But I'm feeling like, oh man, it could be really dangerous to have, you know, a bunch of Cyclops out on the field, especially when you don't even have your Zorkaz units out, right? The Shroud is done, but only one Lakizalisk starting. So if this force hits early enough, Krankendau could be in more trouble.
Yeah, in terms of the raw power, they're pretty strong with the AoE, especially into some of the earlier Zerg units. I will say that we didn't wait for the Vestry here, so there's not going to be any healing for this. So the Lakizalisk might be able to take care of a lot of this.
Ansel here to try to spot for it. So there is that, at the very least, on Hamster's side. I believe this is before the Anseal changes to make it so that they absorb Splash as well. So that has completely changed the matchup in many respects. Protecting a lot of this first push in. The Circuit's doing a lot of damage, finally draining the Anseal of its energy. A couple of the Lakizalisks are here, and that should cancel the attack. Only one Cyclops and two Vultures being felled so far, but one of the Circuits is out, so Krankendau really needs to respect this. He's so far ahead in worker count, though.
Yeah, but he just queued up in a lot of workers as well, and he doesn't really have a lot of anti-air here, so the Anseal might be able to just scout these pretty easily.
You can see Hamster trying to draw the fire of the Lakizalisks off to the one side, but only works as long as that Cyclops on the left is still alive, and the Quasis kind of helped make good short work of that. Only drew one single attack away. Has a lot more back at home. A couple Clarks coming out as well.
Yes, a good defense there from Krankendau. Looks like he's getting some Gorkas here.
Yeah. Trying to... He's a big fan of using that to try to bypass the Anseal shields. That's going to still be effective even in the modern era where they... because the splash damage will still drain the shields a lot faster than single target damage. So it still is a good situational counter. It's not just bypassing it entirely. So as the Gorgs pop out, we should see him task those onto anything protected by the Anseals. A Ministry being started again. Hamster not interested in treasuries this game, and he will be attempting a Cyclops drop. In the main, it looks like. There is a single Spraith to kind of harry it, but that just kind of commits the Trojan. And it doesn't help to put a static defense structure in the mineral line here, because you're still going to take the Cyclops splash, right?
Now, he might have a follow-up here building for this. He is getting a Palladium at home, so he might get tank drops off the back of this.
Oh, no. The Gorgs just sniped that Trojan down. Didn't get a chance to unload anything. That's going to suck. And thanks to some of the work that we've done, you can actually see the corpses of the units that were in there. So you know, in Krankendau's shoes, you're like, oh man, I just sniped as Cyclops. That wasn't just like a fake Trojan or whatever that had nothing in it. So
yeah, I'm actually liking a lot of the new corpse designs as well. It makes it kind of easy to see at a glance in a big fight, you know, what kind of prizes you took home from it.
There you go. Yeah, definitely a big deal. It will probably help a lot with trying to resurrect units as well as Terra. Now, the Gorgs are kind of stacked up here, so they don't really want to fight the Cyclops. And a couple of mines from way back also alerted Hamster to the presence of more Zerg to the left. The Lakislesks are setting up for the ambush, and looks like Krankendau trying to go for a mini surround here as a couple Zeths are going to charge forward, dealt with in short order by the Cyclops. And those Gorger cores are getting really, really low. I know this might look good initially for the Zerg, but those Cyclops are about to get rid of all of them. And it's only really the Zoryu standing tall. Krankendau still committing forward. Really, really dangerous stuff if those Lakislesks get down in range of the workers, but that's not what they're targeting right now. A little bit rough, but the Cyclops are still here. I think they'll be able to stop too much worker death from happening. Remember that Hamster doesn't have that many workers relative to his opponent, but with the Madrigals out as well, a couple of them going down. There's so many low workers there, man. But it does look like only one of them ended up going down.
Now, the problem with this, though, is that Krankendau's got another base off the back of this, and he's kind of shaved down the army for Hamster, so it's going to be a while before he can push out and get any kind of pressure on this base.
Absolutely. I mean, he's lifting his ministry to the third as Krankendau's already got his third hatch up and a fourth coming in the top left. I love what Krankendau has been trying to incorporate into his play ever since his tournament debut back in the May Royal Invitational following Acropolis #1. One of the things that we saw Krankendau do is he struggled a little bit with attacking and not expanding behind it. So he always had a lot of money after an attack. This time around, though, he goes for that expansion. Even though he's just set up a third, he goes for the fourth, knowing that he has the tempo to do so because his army's all the way on the other side of the map. So that ends up being pretty good. You know, I feel like he's in a commanding position of the game, not just in terms of the worker count, but just in terms of map tempo. Like, it looks real dark for Hamster right now. He has no idea what's going on the other side of the map. He didn't even snipe that Ovolith that was sort of spying on his third. So I feel like Krankendau just, all the cards are in his the ball's in his court. I don't know. I'm not very good with idioms.
He might be going for tier 2 here. He's got the money for it.
That's right, yeah. He absolutely could go for that. As soon as he remembers to drop it somewhere. I love the cheeky mines all over the place. That will help Hamster a little bit.
Now, despite all of it, even fighting in his natural there for so long, they're pretty even on workers here. So,
yes, unfortunately for Hamster, about 10 of them are idling at the third, but you know. And then Krankendau hatches. I think he hatched like 15, and he's got 12 more coming. So, short-lived. Man, that's a big mine hit over there as well. I feel like if you're Hamster, you're kind of stuck in no man's land, and it's a little bit fitting, judging by where his army is, because Crank could just sandwich over here with the 2 control groups he's got. Tier 2
Crank
going down to the main.
Really good at these split attacks. This is kind of the scary thing about him.
Yeah, watch out if you're in his group, I'll say that much. Okay, so with tier 2 finished for Hamster, what is he going to jump on? I feel like he actually... The first thing I'd need in this situation is Sentinels. I do not feel safe with the amount of Zerg that are kind of roving the map right now, but we don't really know if Hamster knows all of them yet. Like, knows about all of them.
I think he needs to be going to tier 2. I don't know if he can find the timing for it here, but he's getting kind of stuck in on this heavy gas cost tier 1 army.
For which player? I think they both have tier 2 now.
For Hamster.
Yeah, he's got the Atlas in the natural. It's a funny spot for it. You wouldn't think to look there.
I kept checking the main.
Yeah, the captaincies are going to come up now, but even though he's capping gas, it feels like any production structure he makes right now is not going to buy him the buffer that he needs if Krankendau goes for a decisive attack. Now, luckily for Hamster, the Zerg are not actually doing that just yet, right? Krankendau is kind of taking his time. He's getting his Hydrith Den that'll undoubtedly be evolving later on for probably the Tetzoricor, if I had to guess, the big AoE guy, the AoE melee guy that heals. He also loves his Lyrilisks, so I'm guessing we're going to see some of those. But I don't know. I feel like Hamster was given the opportunity to scale up his army a little bit more and hasn't really been punished for being lax with the defense. The Sentinel's only now coming up online on the third.
Yeah, Hamster might need to try to get a 4th down here if he wants to take this game much longer. Yeah, but it looks like he is kind of pushing out here onto the map.
Well, the Lakislesks make him reconsider that position. There's another incursion from the right-hand side, but Krankendau doesn't want to commit to it until he can get up the ramp. Nice stun from those vultures.
Oh, and the Madrigals are going to tear through this.
Oh my god, there's so many of them. One of them is very, very low. It will end up going down. Stun, that one worked a little bit against Hamster there on the right-hand side. It looks like the Zerg have completely punched out through the top flank. And now, with only a couple of Zoryus left alive on the right side, still going to be good enough. Mostly clerics left in the army. Hamster's got to recall immediately.
He's got a lot of army rallied back here. He might be able to push back in and try to get something out of this fight, but... Oh, the Mines of Stun is unused.
Yeah. Well, at least they had, like, fancy fireworks. That was, like, 4th of July stuff right there, the way that the Rokors exploded all in unison. But, yeah, not looking too good just yet for Hamster. He doesn't really have any Tier 2 units out. He's making the guild halls. I guess he wants Autocrats and Olympians, but these Lakissilisks are absolutely running through him. And Apostle reclaimed, like, 2 units and then just got sniped down immediately. This might be writing on the wall, man.
Yeah, I think he needed to stay on the Apostles a little bit longer to keep his units alive, but...
It should
yeah,
be
the army numbers kind of say it all here.
I know, yeah. He's got an even army to workers there. A lot of it disappeared because he made it 41 Lyralisks just got queued up. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, this is a crazy unit, by the way. I think people slept on it for way too long.
Yes. I think so too. I was always like, I'm always the proponent of the underdog unit that doesn't get utilized very often. You know, like we were talking actually about Didax earlier before we started the cast, and it's kind of the same thing. But like, nobody gave any respect to the Lyralisk. Same for the Cyclops and the Eidolon. And I was just like, no, guys, come on, they're really good. Well, Krankendau is happy to use the Lyralisks. They do move very fast, so that helps.
Yeah, that's the big part about them. They're so fast. They can kind of just take engagements where they want. It's kind of like a mini Dragoon almost. Or Draken.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Well, they are pretty small, so Cyclops can still help them out on their way back to Death's Door. Still just have Apostles and Madcaps for Tier 2 units here, but some Olympians are on the way. If you can keep them alive versus all of the splash damage and bounce damage, maybe you can have a chance. But the Ancial count is very low, and oh my god, look at how many Lakissilisк spines there are. This army is dead. It's a full surround from Krankendau to completely eviscerate. He was even using melee units versus the Apostles. Such was his confidence. Has completely ignored the third base, so those Sentinels never really had a chance at interacting with the main army. Maybe he'll think twice about attacking into this when he sees the advanced infantry, but I think you can just power through this, man. I think Krankendau's about to take the game.
Yeah, this Krankendau making his own Zerg Swarm video here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Could put this in the trailers if you wanted to make a cinematic out of it. Unfortunately for Hamster, I feel like the only thing he'll be able to react Fraud Champ to in this game is his GG, his death. It's over. Game number 1 passed on to Krankendau. And that means that, well, we have to go to another map to decide who's going to take the decided advantage, or if we're going to tie things up before we move on to our part 2, so to speak. But, yeah, any thoughts on how that game went while I wrangle the lobby for the next replay?
Yeah, I think it was actually a pretty close game for a lot of it. I think Krankendau just had the better base count, and he kept his worker count higher for longer. The main issue I think Hamster has sometimes is transitioning into a late game macro. He opened up really well, and he got himself situated on 2 base. Hopefully we get to see a couple more games, see what adjustments he makes.
Yeah, fair points. We do have Blackwater Bastion as the map selected, or that was played for our second replay here. Krankendau is a bit of a grinder. He plays a lot of games, and then he kind of finds like the ones that he thinks were the best or like the closest or what have you, and the most interesting ones for a cast, and submits them. So I say we get right into it. It's part number 2 here, the game number 2 of our set. And I mean, if this is a 4-spawn map, it will be horizontal spawns, so I suppose air units could be a factor, but Hamster in the top left, Krankendau in the top right. Have you played much on this map, JujiK? This is another map-related question for you as we start things off.
I've watched a lot of games on it. I haven't actually put too many games on it myself. I do think it's a very good map. I think 4-spawn maps in general are just really good to play on, because there's a lot of like early game decision making that goes into like, do I start some kind of early cheese without knowing where my opponent is? Like, how do I scout it? What pattern do I scout? I think that adds a lot of variation to how games go. Yeah,
I would have to agree with that. I feel like it's been a really important aspect of helping to balance out players' like individual player aggression levels, because there are some players who will settle into a pattern of being very aggressive in the early game because they know exactly where their opponent is. And for those players in particular, these can be a knife's edge sort of situations where you're on a two-spawn map, you know where your opponent is, and you're just going to charge headfirst into either victory or defeat, as it often is. Now, I feel like the game has developed enough, not just in terms of its own balance, but in terms of the players and their understanding, that that's not as common anymore, but it used to happen quite a bit, and we were coming off of a pool for Acropolis #1 where there were 0 4-spawn maps or 3-spawn maps, all 2 spawns, and we did sometimes see very, very fast matches because of that, I feel like, or at least in part because of that. So coming into the 4-spawn territory, it's been really nice to actually see what it's done to those types of very aggressive players, those sorts of, I'm going to, I always love a rush, love a cheese, that sort of thing. Yeah. You got to plan for it a little bit differently here. I think you can still execute stuff like that, but either it's a little bit on the gamble side or it's a little bit on the, I have to be more thoughtful about it side. And then everybody can, go to sleep a little bit easier at night, knowing that the grand finals didn't include 2 Larvosk drops or 2 Kagrin drops or whatever. That was there's a time to be alive.
Yeah, the 6 pool doesn't always show up.
Right, yeah.
That's actually really... Now, Krankendau actually kind of scouted the early scout by Hamster. He scouted first, and it kind of like got him pointed in the right direction here. Unfortunately, the Vulture does take that out.
Very, very fast, yeah. Krankendau on 4-spawn maps has been the proponent of the 2 Droleth Scout, and I'm sure on the economic side, you have somebody like Neblime, or maybe other players who just like to be playing a little bit more, not on the greedy side, but just on the economic side. They're very mindful about that early game sort of mineral advantage that they can sometimes get. And I don't know that every player would have the constitution to go for the 2 Droleth Scout, but Krankendau likes to do it, and he's pulling his initial worker all the way back around the sort of edge to make sure that it doesn't die to the vultures, or at the very least that he's buying time to clear them out with the heavy quaz push. And you'll notice he's not actually going for the Ovaleth this time around. He does have the Vespian coming for it, but he doesn't have the Kagrin pre-made. So that kind of tells me that he's not as interested in pushing it with the Kagrin initially. And he's going to see if he can maybe punch through the vulture wall, so to speak, with just pure quasi. He does have enough for it. Ooh,
I need to be careful, yeah. After this fight, if you look, Hamster is just all vultures here.
Yeah, that's right. He did have the quarry in the background at the very least, but that worker, get down, Mr. President, it's gone all the way back up, and it looks like Krankendau will be able to drop it in for a hatch very soon. Trading out on the vultures. Hamster's control not the best on that. But hey, that last mine stuns the workers, so Krankendau's going to have to babysit it a little bit.
Economic damage.
That's right. Slowing him down. Yeah, very interesting with the pure vulture off of the 2 fulcrums here from Hamster. This is the second game in a row we've seen that.
Now he needs to get his worker production working here. He's kind of... Okay, here we go. He's
yeah. They were idle for a little bit there. He's trying to get some trades going, but if he doesn't snipe individual quasis, they will just regenerate. So you got to watch out for that.
Okay, this he might need to go in.
Yeah.
There we go.
I think so. Yeah, there's so many of them. And in fact, I think Krankendau's about to hemorrhage a lot of them. But Hamster doesn't jump on the opportunity. There's another really great stun. And as he goes after the ones that are not stunned, that's a good move. He's got 2 more coming. But man, the first 2 that are still alive, the stragglers, they are so low. And in all the excitement, there was a bit of a misrally on the workers. So Krankendau not able to be super efficient in this situation. But he does have the Kagrin coming.
I was going to say this is also pretty good for Hamster trading down like this so much, because it kind of stops Krankendau from going all in on the Droleths here with his second base coming up.
Yeah, and look at this. I mean, Krankendau was trying to be a little bit conservative with his quasis, and he ends up losing the Kagrin. Now, he does get it down before the end, so the sort of... The meta part of the Kagrin drop of just creating build space by your natural, that has still remained intact. But you know what? The Vultures are going to come in for another look. It doesn't look like they'll be able to do anything with that. Although the Quasi's kind of huddling around it. Well, let's see what they can do. These are very healthy Vultures with the exception of the one leading the charge.
Hamster is taking his second base here. I'm not sure why he didn't build a ministry on the ground here, but I guess he wasn't ready to give up this fight just yet.
Yeah, probably just a proximity thing. Like, this is closer, I can go straight back to the fight after ordering this or something like that. And it won't take him too much longer to move over. He doesn't have, like, workers ready to transfer, although he could do so. He could transfer workers for efficiency's sake. We don't really see a lot of players doing that just yet, but When you free up the mental space for everything else, you can maybe start thinking about that. Now, at this point, it doesn't feel like Krankendau can be stopped in terms of any busts in the early game, but that early management was really important. We saw the worker count. You called it out earlier, JujiK. The worker count going up so high in favor of Krankendau in the early game of that last match. You know, this one, it's a very different look. He's been forced to build more and more quasis.
He is going to start to take off here for sure, but the first Ansel is about to pop out right now, and he's going to get a good scout off on this. Let's see if he takes advantage of that and gets some worker production of his own started up. I don't see a second quarry yet.
No Vespian for it just yet. He's about to afford it. He cancels a worker even for that, so he's definitely on the same page as what you're thinking. He doesn't have as many military units this time around. He's got 8 Cyclops, but with so many of the Vultures being kind of low or bruised, and no healing available just yet, no stockade even done, that does mean that Hamster on this side has to start to think about, like, will I even be staging an assault? Now, if he does come in fast enough with the Anseals, you know, maybe he gets like 2 or 3 of them after the scout comes in, he'll notice there's no Zorka's Shroud here for Krankendau. That's another difference from the last game. This could be an opportunity for Hamster to get a lot done. Now, he is going to lose the Anseal, so never mind on that. Gonna be back to the Stone Age, so to speak, and have to think about building another one. That's a blunder.
Now, he is keeping his worker count up, though, so he's not in terrible shape here. And I think him just poking around in this general direction kind of made more quasis get produced in response.
Yeah, but there's 11 workers in production right now, so it does feel like Crank is going to keep on turning that lever into his favor. Now, we do have 4 workers coming out at a pop for Hamster, and he will be able to do that while making military units, which is, of course, the main trade-off. But as the Zorka's Shroud gets ready to finish, the Hydra's then also coming up. I'm actually curious as to what we're thinking here if we're in Krankendau's shoes. Normally you see one, not both, you know, one or the other. And the fact that we're seeing both so early into the game makes me think that Krankendau has some ideas for fighting the mech composition that Hamster is deploying.
Now, he's about to come in here and scout and see that the stockade isn't even done. So, I mean, he's going to have a lot of tech advantage if he takes a fight pretty soon here.
That's right, yeah. Nice leftover mine stun. So many Zerg and a Cyclops for good measure. So that was a little bit of a mega bait on the behalf of Hamster. Remember that Ovoleth was destroyed and another one was made just to scout, well, 8 idle Masons. A classic move. Vultures are going to offer themselves up as one of the circuits does go down. Looks like Hamster's committed to trying to just thin out the herds. We've got 7 Lakizilisks coming out.
Yeah, he might have really good timing here. I don't know if there's anything to stop this.
Yeah, very, very thin margins. Vultures continuing to pepper it down. The last circuit is dead. This is at least opportunity for Larvosks and workers to be killed. You can see the workers already starting to fall away, but targeting down that Larvosk is a great move, and the workers could be even more brilliant, but they are moving a little bit too fast, too far, and those Lakizilisks burrowing, they're going to shut the door on this push. These units are committed.
Yeah, if he had the Ansel with him, it might have been a bit of a different story. He could have tried to fight back, but yeah, he lost that early, and now he is going to get some damage in here.
Yeah, just narrowly getting, it looks like only 2 more workers. And you know what, a couple of other units, odds and ends. But I think the big story there was the economic disruption and the trading down all of the military units and potentially opening the door back. I mean, he kills a Kagran, that's gas. He kills a bunch of the military units. So there's only the Lakizilisks of the 1 Zoryus, plus a couple of Zats.
As well.
Yeah, definitely got a lot of workers. He's actually got the worker advantage for now, and you have to think Krankendau's going to be thinking, I got to build more workers. And, you know, this is allowing Hamster to get his 3rd base up faster than his opponent. He will be floating it over. Anseal just coming in for scouting for good measure, and kind of makes Hamster realize maybe that he's in the lead.
Yeah, with no 3rd base from Krankendau yet, he's going to be pretty far behind against this Tyrian 3rd. Let's see.
I'm not seeing any tier 2 yet, so there is that to be considered. Hamster has 1,200 minerals. Could definitely be spending that a little bit better.
Yeah, I think he's dropping down some more stockades here to do that. I'm not sure. I think he needs to be trying to get the tier 2 right now where he's got this timing. He does have to build his military up a little bit here, but I think he can lean on some vultures. This would be a better play.
I love the idea that the Anseal's trying to block or intimidate this worker and stopping it from expanding, but that's not at all what's happening. The Cyclops are marching over, and look at this. The Anseal's off to the side. They're not going to see the Lakizilisks. Oh, but it looks like Hamster's going to take the smart and long route around. So it's not all that she wrote for them just yet. Now the Anseal comes in to reveal them. This is not a fight I'd be comfortable taking, but it looks like Hamster wants to give it a try. You can see how fast those Lakizilisks, they just make such short work of those Cyclops, and yet, you know what? They're doing a little bit of a trade. A little bit. It's not much, but it's something. Oh my goodness. What carnage.
He needs to get some vultures back out here and get this mine coverage down. That was what was getting him such advantage in these fights.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. He's got a lot of minerals to do so. If he wants to throw down, say, 4, 5, 10 more fulcrums, he could do it. But he is going to go for the savants. That's his crowd control choice du jour. I do think, you know, it kind of makes sense. You might be tempted to go for eidolons for the Lychysilisks, but that feels like a fleeting problem right now. What we see Krankendau making are hydras. So I don't know if Hamster scouted that particular change, but you might want the savants specifically because you're expecting to be fighting against more like mobile armies, and that's what the savants are going to be better at than, you know, the eidolons, which are historically and notoriously very easy to snipe. Funnily enough, considering their role and what they are. But Oveleth sees the third base landing. The fourth base also going out at the same time. Kind of shows where Hamster's priorities have been. Not really on the macro side as this game has progressed past the 12-minute mark.
Now he is still ahead on workers, which is a really good thing to be when you're playing Tyrion here. He is getting back on the vultures. I like that. And he's got 4 covenants now. He's just going all in on these, is he?
Yeah, he's skipping tier 2. He's foregoing it this game. He wants to see if he can sort of push the issue before even building that Atlas. And a lot of workers are being made right now, so Krankendau, if he loses this army and the reinforcement wave that's coming, he will have nothing as a follow-up. And that will be a really big advantage for Hamster. But let's see how this fight breaks out. There's still 4 Lychysilisks. They are doing some damage, and now the savants are starting to maybe activate. They do need to switch off their current mode to get into the crowd control if they want that. Oh man, Krankendau might have found the timing here, just when things were looking up for Hamster. Let's see, the savants still kind of stuck on their single target mode. Sure, it steals attack speed, but there's so many units that you got to watch out for. Switch them off. Not going to happen. Just a couple of Cyclops and Hamster. He actually has to GG. Wow. That's not at all what I thought was going to happen, JujiK. I thought I was buckling in. I was thinking, you know, we got another 10 minutes.
It looked like we were going to get another, a pretty long game there, but yeah, like you said, I think Krankendau just hit that timing, and a lot of times that's just what it's about. You just got to catch them when they're getting in that macro transition.
Yeah, and you know what? His Oveleth did see the 4th base coming. I'm pretty sure it saw it floating by. So to see both of those but no workers kind of tells you that maybe my opponent wasn't on the ball when it came to the production and macroing up, and maybe gives him the opportunity there to say, okay, he's going to try to rectify that, maybe over-focus on that, and not necessarily have all of the units. I still think if he had, say, I think he had 4 savants in that fight. If they were on the crowd control mode, that fight might look a little bit different, but it was definitely a bit of a rough one. He would have had to micro his heart out just to stay alive and intact in that one. And maybe showing the limit of going only Cyclops versus that mixed army, particularly the Lychysilisks. I feel like if we were to rewind the replay and go back to when the big fight happened where he kills like 3 Lychysilisks but loses, I don't know, 10, 12 Cyclops, that might have been the one where Hamster overextended a little bit. And he didn't realize it, but maybe that was the death warrant there.
Yeah, I think he had a lot of really good plays that game. And one thing I want to say, though, about it is he's in this position where he's trying to do these expansions really quickly, but I don't think he needed to do that. He could have just sat on the 3 base or the 4 base, and I think he would have been fine. One thing... I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go for it.
I kind of lost my train of thought.
Oh, okay, you got it. Well, what I will say about the 3 base versus 4 base for Terran is that I will notice that, I mean, Hamster started this off as a Zerg player. He was a Zerg player to begin. His worst matchup was versus Protoss. He switches to Protoss after his first couple tournament run-ins, and he seems to do well with that, adapting. And now he's chosen the path of the Terran because he felt like there were too few Terrans. And what do you know? Now we have an influx of Terrans. Hamster, you'll never be exactly satisfied, I feel like, because every time you have a reason to switch, that reason becomes silly later on. I think his previous reasons were like he felt like there were too many ZVZs, and then there became an oversaturation of Protoss, and now he's Terran. And, you know, it's just on and it goes. But I feel like maybe that was where the multi-expand at the same time thing came from. Maybe also just looking at your minerals and just being like, well, I have way too many resources. I got to spend this. And just sort of dropping down on ministry because it's 400 minerals. And it is a nice investment into the future. You can definitely use it for that. But I was noticing that the lack of Palladium units, there was not even any scrapyards for Matadors or anything, which would have been an unorthodox choice, but something that might have helped him hold off the Zorius and such when they were sort of bearing down on his army there. And so I don't know. I feel like part of it was a compositional thing. And another part of it was what you were talking about with the tempo thing, where he definitely didn't. He had the advantage to get the third base up faster than Krankendau. Krankendau's hatch hadn't even finished when that attack started. So just to put that into perspective, so that's definitely an opportunity where I feel like Hamster. This game was very, very close. I would say closer than the last one, and it was in Hamster's favor up until he lost the game, basically. So kind of wild, weird. Not a game that you see every day, but hey, still cool. And you know what? We got 2 more to cast later on, so series ain't over. Do you have any closing thoughts for us before we wrap this one up?
Yeah, I just want to give Hamster props on that game because, like you said, I think he was really in the lead and in a commanding position for most of it. And I mean, one thing I do want to give him props for as well is like limit testing tier 1, because I think a lot of people try to rush to tier 2 or try to get to tier 3, but like it is a nice idea to just kind of see how far these units can be taken. I know Hit 'em Up is another player who likes to do that a lot.
Dude, I'll never forget the game where he had something like 40 Goliaths versus tier 3 endgame Protoss on Arbuz. You know, that was on your map, actually. I think it was Scoria Potomos, something like that. So that sounds familiar to me anyway. There's definitely a cast like that happens. So, hey, shout out, Hit 'em Up. And yeah, big fan of Hamster. I hope that he's able to get his groove with Terran. Or, you know, maybe he'll just be like, wait, there's way too many Terrans. I'm going back to Zerg. I don't know what's going to happen. But either way, it was great. Thank you for joining me, JujiK. Appreciate that. We'll be back for part 2 some point later on, I guess by this time next week. So see you then. GG.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Good games.